Good morning. This is Elsie Rodriguez, Superintendent of Schools. I want to welcome our members and our community members who are on this chat with us. This is our first chat, so please bear with us. We are trying a new way of communicating with our families. And so this is our first trial. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time if there's some errors that we have, but our motto here is if we make mistakes or we're not perfect, we just try again. So welcome. So I see that we have a couple of more people logging on. So what you are looking at right now is our agenda for this meeting. We do have specific topics that we're going to be talking about. One of the particular topics we're going to speak about is elementary assessments and why they're important and what kind of information they give us. The next topic is in-district assessments. What other tools, if you've been watching the board meetings, we've been talking about the New York State test that our students are taking in grades 3 through 8. But we're also talking about other formative and classroom teacher tests. All of that information provides us with critical information for us to move on as a district and make really informed curricular decisions. We're also going to talk about formative assessments, communications of results, our reading instruction, our new math program, STEAM and science investigations, and parent-teacher conferences. And so if you see a topic that you are wondering, why didn't we talk about that? Our goal is if there's a topic that we missed or you think is very valuable, this is one in a series of conversations. Please feel free to email me or put it in the chat and say, at your next meeting, could you talk about this topic? If there is a specific question about your child, then I would recommend that you have that conversation, that you reach out to wherever your child attends, or if it has to do with special education, to please reach out to the people that we have here today. So let me begin by introducing myself again, because I did see that some people got on. I'm Elsie Rodriguez. I'm the school superintendent. And I would like to turn it over to the next person to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Kravitz. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, focusing on the elementary grades, UPK or pre-K through 5. Eric Ulau, you're up.
My name is Eric Ulau. I'm the Director of Special Education for students in elementary grades. I oversee students with disabilities, both those with IEPs and 504 plans, grades pre-K through grade 5, and I work to ensure that the district develops plans that are appropriate for students with disabilities, and ensuring that we provide them with a free and appropriate public education and that we are meeting our students' needs.
Good morning. My name is Julissa Rincon-Tomizawa. I am the Director of People Personnel Services here in Monroe-Woodbury. I'm excited to be here supporting our families with our students who attend programs and out of district. I am also here to support all of our administrators and teams at the building level with all matters related to students who need additional support, related services, and our school nurses as well. So thank you for being here and good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Arlt, the principal at Central Valley Elementary School. And we're excited to be with everyone this morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Cotto, the building principal at North Main Elementary School.
And good morning, everybody. I'm Brian Giudice. I'm the principal at Pine Tree. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Caitlin Caldwell. I'm the principal at Sapphire Elementary School. Sapphire is where we currently house 3 of our universal pre-K classes, and we are a kindergarten and first grade building.
And good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nikki Cook. I'm the principal at Smith Clove Elementary School, which is another kindergarten and first grade school.
Thank you all for joining us again. And some of you have just joined us. So I wanted to just briefly talk about, I want you to take a look at the agenda that we have here today. We've allotted about an hour to an hour and a half. But if we finish sooner, then we are done. But again, we will give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end of our presentation. And if there are other questions that you have that are specific, that you will reach out to the appropriate person who are on this call. So the purpose of this online chat is really to communicate with our families in a different way. This is the first time that we're doing this Crusader chat with our families specific to curriculum. if you've been watching our Board of Ed meetings, we've been very highly focused on instruction of our students. And so we thought, as we talked about communication, that we'd use this online platform. So if you didn't hear this already, I've apologized because it's our first time. So surely with your first time of attempting something new, it may not go perfectly, but know that the purpose of this is really to engage you in conversations that are really important about one of the most important things that we do here, which is instruction and making sure that our students get the right instruction that they need. So you may have heard at our board meetings, we've been talking a lot about the New York State assessment, the 3 through 8 assessment. And one of the things that I had shared at the board meeting that I felt was very important is the why. Why should our students take this test? And I know there was a time here in the district when people were a little adamant about not taking the exam, and I understand that. And we are not looking to over-test our children, but what we are looking for is critical data. And the assessment that the students take in April with the ELA and the math and eventually the science as well, and in grades, again, in the middle school, in the elementary school, is important data for us to put in a set of data. So for example, one of the things that we do is we take a STAR assessment. So that's another piece of data. You'll hear about common assessments. So one of the things that we've been working diligently on is making sure that students get the same assessment throughout 3rd grade. And I use 3rd grade as an example. And the importance of that is because that data is what we use to help inform instruction in the classroom, but also to look at students as a cohort. And you may have heard that word used last night and at the presentation before. And a cohort is simply a group of students that started school together, and then we follow these students as they go throughout our school district. So you'll hear us talk about the 3rd grade cohort of this year. So that cohort will be moving into 4th grade, and we look at their progress as a cohort. You'll hear us use that word when we talk about graduation, right? Students that came in together, what did that cohort do and how did they do as far as progressing to graduation? So a lot of conversation about students as a cohort, the importance of data, the importance of multiple data points. So again, the state assessment is one data point. It's important because it gives us a standardized assessment for the state, and it gives us really important data. You may have heard at one of our meetings where we talked about this doesn't impact a student's grade, but it does give us the information about how our students are doing. Yesterday, Mr. Kravitz talked about the state possibly going to individual student performance, because of course it's important to get group data, but you as a parent are sitting here and you're saying, well, I want to know how my child is progressing. So we do give those types of assessments. Again, we use the STAR assessment in reading and in math. We use classroom assessments because our teachers, of course, are our first defense. They're our first tier of instruction. And so those assessments are critical to us as well. But again, it's using all of this data to make informed decisions about our students and our individual students as well. So, Mr. Kravitz, do you want to speak a little bit about the evolution? And I know this is riveting, the evolution of the Common Core. So,
Sure.
and
Sure.
he does
Now,
a good job of that. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
thanks. So good morning again, everybody. And to those who just hopped on, welcome. We have a group of very experienced people here. Some people have been in the district a long time, others who are newer to the district, but everyone has their own role and their own sets of experience or sets of experiences that they can bring to the table. What we're going to be talking about very briefly is just, why we have to take part in some of these. Years ago, New York State came out with a set of learning standards. Most states did. And what happened is every state had their own individual standards. So if you were at school in Missouri, your state worked on the one set of standards, and in New York was a different set, and California was a different set. And then the country moved, or parts of the country moved, to a more countrywide set of assessments, or what was supposed to be a countrywide set of assessments, and that became the Common Core. And Common Core, we can get into hours of conversation about, the benefits or, the pros or the cons. But my understanding is the basic vision of it was to make sure that every kid had access to the same standards and same level of instruction across the country. There were, one of the things that I think a lot of people remember about the Common Core was a change in math, something as simple as math. You had parents who were trying to work with their students. And I think what we constantly heard was, well, this isn't how I learned math. And this math is so wholly different from the way I learned it that I don't understand it. And now I need support in helping my own child just to learn math. You know, things as simple as multiplication, where it used to be, 48 times, 24, and we did it the old way. We would do the 4 times the 8 and carry the number. And then we'd move to lattice multiplication. And what is that? And one of the points was to really start to have kids put down the way they think onto paper. Common Core came, Common Core kind of went, and then these things called the next generation standards were adopted by New York State. And the next generation standards were a little more progressive. They are things that it's what we're using now in all of our areas. If you go onto the state websites, and we can certainly provide all that information to you if you haven't seen it yet, they're a little more detailed. They focused, for example, the science, next gen standards focus on more student-driven, initiated activities such as investigations and labs. So what our high school students typically experience in a high school science class with, they meet every day, and then every other day they have a lab, or every third day they have a lab. It's bringing that lab type of experience down to the elementary level. And then when New York State says, hey, you have to do something, there's an assessment that goes along with it. So part of this is, these are the things that we have to do. So there's a list of things that we don't have a choice but to do. One of those things is taking part in our New York State testing program. So there are assessments, grades 3 through 8. And then you get into the Regents level types of classes in high school. But grades 3 through 8, every student is asked to take an assessment in English language arts, an assessment in math, and then in grades 5 and 8, starting next year, our students will be taking an assessment in science. We don't have a choice. Our kids, they have to take them. And our job is to make sure that our students are prepared for them, not necessarily just so that they could do well on those assessments, but the everyday learning and instruction so that then they can reach proficiency is what our goal is. So that's pretty much the evolution of the standards. Going back to what Elsie had said is important, because there are a number of different ways that we try to understand how our kids are doing. And ultimately what we want to strive for is to create these individualized profiles of learners. That's ultimately what we want to do, because if we know how our kids are performing, whether it's in reading or writing or math or science or social studies or whatever the area it is, if we know how they're doing, then we know how to best instruct them. Is there something else that we need to give them? Is there something else that we need to give our teachers so that they then can best support our students? And that's one of the goals, and one of the reasons why we use so many different assessments. The New York State assessment, like Mrs. Rodriguez said, is a snapshot. And ultimately, we want to have these multiple snapshots. So whether it's the New York State assessment or the STAR benchmark that many of you probably know about because you meet with your classroom teachers, the STAR benchmark that we use is given 3 times a year in reading and 3 times a year in math. They are singularly focused passages. So a student who takes the reading assessment will read a single passage and then it's strictly multiple choice, answer multiple choice questions about it. That's a nationally normed test. So they use norms from across the country. And it's also what's called an adaptive assessment. So meaning that a student starts at a certain point. If he or she gets a question right, then the test becomes progressively harder. If a student gets a question incorrect, then the assessment is reflective of that, and then they start to adjust their level. So you do have individual information that comes from that. We also have, Mr. Rodriguez mentioned common assessments and the importance of that. So that, and the example that she had used was 3rd grade, making sure that our teachers are doing the same thing, because ultimately we want to create a system that, when we have students who move from one building to another, or from one class to another, or just happen to be walking down the hall, what's happening in one class from an educational standpoint should be happening in another class. That doesn't mean that every class has to run exactly the same way. That doesn't mean that the culture of every single building has to be the exact same. every classroom, every building has their own individual culture and the way they approach things, with their level of energy or whatever it is that they bring to the table is obviously going to be different from classroom to classroom. But the expectations that are laid out and what we present to students, that's what we're working towards making similar. And then assessing them and understanding how they're doing. So if we can give a common assessment, if it's third grade math and every student in third grade is taking the same exact assessment, ultimately we can see how students are performing. And if kids are really knocking a certain area out of the park, that's great, and we can celebrate that. But if we find that students in a particular grade level are really struggling with, a specific area or a specific topic, then we know as the district leadership team that we need to put some more resources into or have conversations with our educators to say, all right, what happened here? What happened with this particular topic? And I said last night in our board meeting, this isn't a gotcha. This isn't like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Here's how you're performing, teacher. That it's not what this is about. It's about saying, okay, we're noticing that there's a need here. How do we best meet those needs? And there can be a wide variety of reasons for those needs, right? It might be the student's background in terms of their own experiences. It may be, that morning or that stretch of time might have been a really difficult or challenging time, either for the educator or for the student. But understanding the why behind the performance of our students becomes really important. And the best way to understand that is to have information. And so that's ultimately the goal, is to have as much information as we can.
Can I just jump
Yeah,
in?
you could. You're the boss. You can do whatever you want.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome.
No, I think that one of the things when we talk about common assessments, what's key here is the alignment of these assessments to the standards. That's going to be critical because the state gives us our curricular and we have to follow that curricular. So by aligning the assessments to the standards, we know if we're meeting it, if we're meeting our benchmark or we're not. And so by doing this, we continue to collect more and more information about students. And as Mr. Kravitz said, if we look at a third grade class and we say this third grade class, and I'm going to use the word I spoke about, as a cohort is struggling with a particular skill, then we know that's going to impact down the line, right? So we prepare our future, the next grade, to say this cohort as in general really struggled with this particular skill. So let's reinforce that skill as we begin to develop the curriculum for the following year. That information is going to be critical to the next year's teacher, because then they know what they have to focus on. So again, I just want to reiterate that the assessments that we provide our students, those common assessments, really have to be aligned with our standards, because that's the key piece for us. We know if we're meeting our own benchmarks or if we're not. And if we're not meeting them, as Mr. Kravitz said, what are the things that we need to do? And they come in an array of things. It could actually be looking at, if you watched last night's meeting, it may be looking at the student schedule. Are we providing a system for these students to really maximize learning, or does a schedule impede that? And these are a lot of the questions that we've been asking as a leadership team in this district. How do we maximize our students' learning? And how do we maximize our teachers' instruction? And so it's not just about the actual instruction. It could also be looking at the time that our students are spending in the classroom. So I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Kravitz, but I just want
No.
that point.
It's okay. You don't have to be sorry. Not even a little bit. But also just that's ultimately why we feel that students should participate. And it gives us information. It helps us with our own baseline. We're creating our own baseline set of information. I think one of the things that was hard, even when the pandemic started, was trying to determine how much progress our kids made or how much learning loss there may have been when you don't have that individualized profile to understand where every student was performing before the pandemic. We don't want to guess as to whether or not there's learning loss because of a pandemic or they're rising. We just want to have that information because it makes sense. When it comes to rolling out the assessments this year, there are 2 assessments that would be taking on the state level at the 3 through 5 level. There's one in English language arts, there's one in math. The English language arts assessment is not just reading. So the STAR assessment that I mentioned earlier, is strictly focused on reading. The ELA is focused on, yes, it's focused on reading, and there is a multiple choice section, but it's also focused on responding to reading and then subsequently writing. Ultimately, the STAR assessment, like I said earlier, focuses on one single passage and the student reads it and answers questions. The ELA, a student may read a question or read a passage, answer some questions, read a second passage, answer some questions, and then have to compare the two passages in order to answer extended response questions. So it's a little bit more challenging, and that test is also directly aligned with New York State standards. So you had the STAR, which was a nationally normed assessment, and then you have the New York State ELA assessment, which is based on New York State standards. The math is similar. The math is also based on New York State standards. We last year decided to give all of our students in grades 3 through 8 the ELA and math test on a computer. So a few years ago, New York State said, yep, we want all of our students to take these New York State assessments on a computer. Last year, everybody took it. And one of the things in reflecting and really discussing with our building principals and our building leadership team was that may have been too much for all of our students at that time. So what we did is we adjusted. And that's what you do, right? In education, you try things, if they work, you stick with it. And then if they're not, then you have to be honest with yourselves and with each other to say, that didn't work. So let's kind of pull back and let's do something different. The computer-based testing this year will be rolled out in 2 grade levels in the 3 through 5 level. So 4th and 5th grade will be taking the ELA on the computer. Those 2 grades have taken the ELA now for multiple years on the computer. And we felt like out of the 2 assessments between math and ELA, that it was the more user-friendly. It's probably the best way I can say it. 3rd grade is going to take it on paper this year, regular old school paper. And the reason for that is we want to get a very good understanding of the material that our students know. Do they know the information? Are they able to best, is it best able to give us the information that we want? And we don't want the computer skills, if that's a reason for, kids not doing as well as they can. We don't want the computer skills for our kids who are the first time they're taking a state assessment. We don't want that to come into play. So we took that out of the mix. So our 3rd graders will take it on paper. Our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders will also take the math assessment completely on paper. And the reason for that is, again, if you're taking a computer-based assessment and using a Chromebook, a student is going to have, it comes with tools, right? So usually when you take a paper-based test, you have a ruler. And you can use your ruler and you can measure and then you can write your answer. Or a protractor if it's you typically in 5th grade. When you're taking it on the computer, you have to use a ruler that's on your computer screen, move it over to the actual question, and then try to measure it. And if you're not adept at that, at doing that, then it may not be inherently fair to the kid and it may not be a true reflection of whether or not he or she actually understands what's being asked. It might be more of a, hey, I'm not entirely sure how to use this computer. And we didn't want that to happen for this year. And we do want to compare cohorts. So our 3rd graders who took it last year on the computer, we want to see how those students as 4th graders this year do when they're not taking on the computer, because we want to determine whether or not the method of taking the test using the computer is a big enough variable when it comes to understanding their performance. So that's important for us for this year. So I think I just covered my 4 bullets and the in-district assessments.
Thank you.
And that's that.
Yes. And so there's other things, right? So as we talk a lot about a partnership that we have with our families. And so there are other ways for students and our families to partner with us. And one of the things that I have on the agenda is homework. The value of homework. We don't want to give our students too much homework, but homework is really important so that we understand how the students are doing when they're not with us, right? It's a way of reflecting about the day's instruction and then coming back and sharing that with their classmates and their teachers. And I have lots of principals here. So if anybody wants to jump in and talk about your class projects or in-class participation, feel free to do so, because
You're running out of things to say, Elsie, there for that topic. I'll jump in a little bit. I know everybody will probably follow suit. So I'm going to circle back a little bit on homework. We've adjusted the homework at North Main, and I believe a lot of the buildings are looking at that grades K through 5 as the amount of homework. The excessive amount sometimes isn't beneficial. So you may hear that out there. You may hear things like a no homework policy, but it's really not a no homework policy. It's a limitation on the amount of homework, because we want students to obviously practice when they're talking about math. But the days of going home and practicing 25 math problems, those days are gone, because it's not practical. You get the first 5 wrong, you're going to get the next 20 wrong, and it's not going to help you. You're just repeating that process. So, we've looked at those type of things. So there is a limitation out there. We want kids to also go home and have a home life and enjoy that. So we have limited that. Projects and things like that, we have adjusted moving forward, just because we try to do a lot of that in school. And that goes along with the in-class participation. We have the resources and supplies. You're paying taxes to send your kids to school, so we should be able to supply those things to you. So the kids do a lot of projects in school, a lot of project-based learning, which we'll talk about later on when we talk about STEAM a little bit. But I'm sure that's the same across the board. The K1s can chime in. They'll say the same thing. I know Caitlin Caldwell is dying to chime in.
We do see the same, and we do practice the same. Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everybody, or good almost afternoon. Our teachers definitely utilize the opportunities to observe students, and I'll teach a little bit more, or I'll speak a little more to that when I discuss reading instruction in a few moments, about the different types of data that they do collect that is both qualitative and quantitative from assessing students using homework, projects, things of that nature, and also observing them interacting with one another, particularly at the K1 level, reading together, writing together, discussing math problems. And those are some of the practices that are, and the habits of mind that are really heavily embedded in the next gen standards.
Thank you. So does anybody else want to say anything for this moment? Okay, thank you for sharing that. And yes, I agree. When a long time ago, when I was the building principal, homework was a big topic, and we want to make sure that we give students the right amount of homework. And I see that Jasmine has a question. Jasmine, can you hold your question till afterwards? Just keep it, or you can put it on the chat and then we'll answer it, if that's okay. And so it's really important to make sure that we are setting the same message, right? We understand the pandemic has taught a lot of lessons, and one of them being that family time is important. Giving students downtime, not overscheduling our children so that they're stressed out, and all of those things are important for us to reflect on and make important decisions, because we want to make sure that our children have a balanced day. And so homework is one of those topics. I'm going to turn this over into to Caitlin to talk a little bit about reading instruction. Caitlin?
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Oh, I'm sorry, I need to apologize. Before I continue, I just want everyone to know on the call that we are recording this. We said this last night, that we were going to be recording this, because we are going to post this for our families who couldn't make it. So yes, go on.
Great. Hi again, I'm Caitlin Caldwell. I'm the principal at Sapphire Elementary School. It's one of our K1 buildings. We also house 3 sections of our UPK. So the arc of reading begins with students learning to read in the early childhood grades, K through 1, and culminates when students read to learn in the upper elementary and secondary grades. Our current model of literacy instruction, which includes reading, writing, and phonics, is rooted in the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project, and it is combined with elements of something called guided reading. The Teachers College model of instruction is structured as a workshop model. That is, that teachers provide a very short, brief, direct instruction followed by, and that's called a mini lesson, which is followed by students working in partnerships or small groups, and then independently to apply their new reading, writing, and phonics skills that are aligned with that specific lesson. In 2019-2020, we adopted the Teachers College Phonics curriculum for all of our K1 students. One of the benefits to this approach is that the common routines, including the common language related to reading, writing, and most importantly at the younger grades, phonics, which is the foundation and mechanics of reading and writing for all teachers. It's consistent for students, faculty, and staff, grades K5. So the routines and language related to how we teach reading, writing, and phonics in the earlier grades is the same. In reading specifically, students are reading books on their reading level, and teachers are able to provide instruction through a highly individualized approach, building students' fluency in reading, which is how they read and how smoothly they read, as well as their comprehension, which is how well they understand what they read. In the upper elementary grades, so 2-5, rather than specific reading, writing, and phonics so heavily embedded into the model, it's ELA, but they're still practicing the same, learning the same skills in reading, writing, and phonics, and also practicing these things. No matter what, it's crucial that our families continue to read to our students at home and read with them. And while technology is very enticing, we strongly encourage you to use paper books, a print book. It's developmentally really important for our students to learn those pre-literacy skills and scanning left to right and how to turn pages. And there's something really nostalgic and important about that. They can always read on a tablet or a computer, but please make sure that you that your child does have access to print books, and we encourage you to read with your child daily.
So just to piggyback what Ms. Caldwell was talking about, one of the things that's important when it comes to any of our curricular areas is to constantly review whether or not what we're doing is what we should continue to do. This year we're in, and Mr. Giese is going to talk about it in just a second, we're in year 1 of a new math program, which is sort of new and sort of not. It's the same program that we had used for years previous to this current year, but it is updated and improved. So he'll talk about that in just a second. We will be reviewing, we are now beginning our review of reading as a whole. Is the Teachers College units of study, is that the way that we need to continue to teach kids reading, or do we need to change and adjust? Are there skills that are missed when we use this method or not? And we have a team, the administrative team on this call has given me a list of people who to say, hey, look, these are the people that I want to help support the review of this, of reading as a subject area. So I have that list. So now I get to formally invite those people to say, hey, guess what? You're now going to be a part of this. It is time consuming. It does. But what we're going to do is look at what's out there and see what may be different. And if it's better ultimately for our kids, then we need to make a decision about, moving towards that. So that's where we are as far as reading and instruction at this point. Okay, thank you, Ms. Caldwell.
And can I just jump in on that? And I just
Sure.
want to say some of the things, some of the parameters that we work with when we make these decisions, right? Part of what we'll look at is how does it support all of our students? Are there particular students that this is not going to work for them? So therefore, what do we do? Do we go with this or do we go with something different? So there's a lot of pieces that we take into our decision making when we decide to move away from one program to another. And that's really important for us to do because we serve a diverse population of students, and we need to make sure that whatever program we choose, that it supports the needs of all of our students. And sometimes that's difficult, right? Because programs tend to be one way of working. So there'll be other components that we add on to make sure that we are supporting the students that we serve. So I just wanted to make sure of that. Kayla, did you want to go on, or are you done?
No, that's it for me. That's the snapshot for reading.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to Mr. Giese now, who's going to speak about our new math program.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Giese, for those that have joined us. I'm the principal over at Pine Tree. And I've also worked with the district-wide math committee for years. And we have shifted over to the Envision 2022 program due to the fact that the standards have changed from Common Core to Next Gen. The prior programs through Envision 2015 and 2012, of course, become obsolete with the standards changing. And so from our perspective, we take a philosophical approach of making sure children are successful in being able to think mathematically. We want them to be able to take concepts in a concrete format, meaning with manipulatives, with base 10 blocks, with fraction bars, with whatever types of manipulatives kids have, along with the written piece to understand the written language and also the numerical language, and eventually turn that into their knowledge on the one-dimensional math instruction with regard to paper and pencil, and looking at diagrams of those same manipulatives and our number sense, and also the written number sense, and eventually turning that into being able to computate straight, math problems, word problems. So shifting from that, working with hands-on materials through the paper and pencil is something our teachers do throughout the year with each new concept. Our Envision 2022 program is tied to the New York State standards, the Next Gen standards rather. The math committee and the math teachers at work on our committee did a deep dive to see exactly where and how the standards are being met. And at the end of their search, they were able to say that this program does meet the needs of the Next Gen standards. Parents do have access to the materials. We have, of course, we're a one-to-one district with regard to Chromebooks assigned to each student, and students have their Envision 2020 login. So when kids are home, they can log in, and there's a parental piece where parents can see the video that helps explain what that lesson was for that day, and also see what's being taught, at that time. Now, I will share, Matt alluded to this a few moments ago, we still have that component of things that were the way we all learned math back when we were in school. And this program, again, is just a program. The standards drive our instruction. And the Envision 2020 math program is a tool that we're using to meet the standards. So the standards are always the focus here. But with regard to our students and the math concepts being taught, we try to give them a lot of different ways to solve problems. And we want them to be creative math thinkers so they can pick and choose which way to solve the problem works best for them. Now, certainly we can just strictly teach the computation piece like we've done for years, but it's important for kids to see different ways to solve problems. And that's what Envision 2020 does. And students on their own, when they sit in front of the unit test or the daily common review or a state test, they will pick and choose which method works best for them. And that's a good thing for kids to have choice, for kids to be able to think independently and have a say in how they solve a problem. So from our end, the Envision 2022 program is new, but we've been using the Envision program for years. So there's some newness to it. For instance, grades 3, 4, and 5 no longer have textbooks. The company now produces consumables for K through 5. So every year we get new consumable workbooks for the classroom experience, but also the homework books as well. That allows the company to kind of shift and adjust as needed as the years progress. So I think that covers everything I wanted to share. I'm sure I'm forgetting lots.
No, you did. No. But I wanted to share with our listeners, with our people on this call, that I witnessed that for myself when I went to Miss Caldwell, when I went to Sapphire, and I saw a teacher doing a math lesson, and she asked the students to do an addition, have an addition problem. And so a student got the answer right. And so he raised his hand, little young boy, and she said to him, so what were you thinking about when you got that answer? And it was really interesting because the student, first paused, and she said, well, how did you do that? And it was addition. So he put up his hands and he said, I added with my fingers in my head. And I thought that's really good, because then he understood his own learning. Like, that's what I use. Somebody else might have used it different. They might have used sticks. They might have put sticks down and, added sticks and then counted them up. But he used his fingers. And so it's really important as we talk about the development of our students and how they think. You're going to hear more and more that we're asking students to think about how they get their answers. It's just not enough to get the right answer. It's important to understand, for students to understand their own thinking and how they get to that answer. So thank you, Brian. I think you did a great job. And if you think of something else, feel free to interject. But I'm going to move on to STEAM and science investigations. And I believe both Mr. Cotto and Dr. Alt will be speaking to that.
Yes, we will. You want me to go first there, Christine?
Go for it, Mr. Cotto.
Okay. So if I was to give you a definition of what STEAM is, I mean, the formal definition is it's a focused education. It introduces students to a new subject. It allows them different learning methodologies to be utilized. It infuses creativity in elementary classes. It provides them with innovative thinking ways, how they change, how they evolve. Now that's the definition. Now STEAM in most districts is STEM. In Monroe Woodbury, we've kind of added something to that. We added an A in there, so it's STEAM, stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Math. The best way to explain it is to kind of give you one of their activities, for example. So if you walked into a STEAM lab this morning in North Main or in CV, Pine Tree, any of the buildings, you might see a particular activity going on. For example, this teacher may give the students, they may tell them, look, we want you to create a working light. And what they would do is they would give the students wire, batteries, switch, small light bulb. The only direction the teacher would give then at that point is they have to use the switch to create the light. And that's all they give them. They go into their groups. The teacher will walk around the room then at that point, and they kind of listen. The students are working collaboratively. They're working in groups. They're doing that. They're doing some problem solving. The teacher will then offer some guidance, but not as far as direction, but maybe questioning them a little bit. To get them to think, to use that catchphrase, thinking out of the box a little bit. And really the goal of the STEAM program is to give all of our students a room to explore, experiment, and solve problems logically. It really pulls in everything that you just heard about math, about reading, art. It pulls all of that together into a project-based course and gives the students some freedom to explore, be creative. The art piece is something, like I said, that we've added, which is a unique element. This morning, for example, I went into the STEAM lab and they were working on logo designs to go with one of their activities, bringing in the art element. So it's a great program to bring everything together under one roof. And now I think Dr. Alt would like to go through the science investigations.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Cotto, and very similar to everything that our colleagues have shared here regarding the shift and changes in the standards. All of this with the ELA and math blends very nicely into the shift to the New York State Next Gen Science Standards. It is no longer are we asking students to recall information or to memorize specific facts. It is really being more done through conducting experiments with students learning through investigating phenomenons where they're collaborating and sharing their thinking. Students are now asked to create or identify problems, not only to solve them. And similarly, as in math, where there's not only one way to solve a problem, students are asked to share their thinking to be able to identify problems, create problems, and find multiple solutions to that problem that has been either presented or that they have discovered. And that becomes very important as children are engaging in these experiments and these investigations at every grade level in physical sciences, life sciences, and earth and space sciences. And this shift in their understanding also helps prepare our children for the future. I think we're at about 80% of jobs that don't exist yet for what our children will be entering a workforce. So no longer is it, okay, here's the job, here are the skills to be able to, but really through this approach, our children being able to be successful in their future. And that is also being assessed on the new science assessment. New York State science assessment has been moved from 4th grade. This year, our 4th graders will not participate in a science assessment, which I'm sure they're very excited about. However, next year for the 2023-24 school year, there will be a 5th grade science assessment. And part of that assessment will be our 5th graders participating in 4 investigations prior to taking part in a written portion on the exam. And again, those science investigations will be designed around everything that we talked about, excuse me, where children will have to participate and really do that work and then have some collaboration, take that information, and then be able to present their findings and their solutions independently.
Thank you. And last but not least, before we go to our Q&A, we have Ms. Cook, who's going to speak about parent-teacher conferences.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about the many ways that we can communicate everything that we like to with you and partner with you. This is just one example, and I want to thank Ms. Rodriguez and Mr. Kravitz for thinking outside of the box on how we can best reach all of our parents and our families, because we all have very busy lives. So we invite you at the beginning of the year to start with our open houses. We're all very excited to show off our classrooms and show off our buildings, but also to welcome you into your children's learning experiences. So it's an opportunity to receive an overview on what is to come. But then there are parent-teacher conferences, and these are vital and an important part in learning about how your child is doing, as well as what strategies and interventions work best for them. We do utilize the Pick a Time online program to sign up for conferences, and your individual elementary school's main office can help you if this is a new program for you. If for some reason you aren't able to sign up with a parent-teacher conference, though, our teachers want to have communication with you, and they use many ways to do that, from phone calls, emails, Google Classrooms. They will do whatever they can to partner with you. And if you have any questions, again, I encourage you to call the main office of your school's, your individual school. At the elementary level, report cards are sent home at the end of every trimester, and we're in the middle of the year right now. So you've already had an opportunity to receive a report card. This year they were printed up and sent home in backpacks. And we also utilize progress reports in between those. Not every child will get a progress report, but for students who are performing below grade level or we have some concerns about, you may get one that gives you a little more explanation, whether it's reading, writing, math, or other areas. You can also see those STAR test results that we spoke about. They are available through the parent portal. We can give them to you other ways too. So again, contact us. These assessments are given 3 times a year, and they're just one piece of information that help us to develop lessons focusing on where students are needing some extra support. But in the end, and you've heard this many times, we value the partnership with you in promoting confidence, inspiring a passion for learning, and preparing your students to become responsible global citizens.
Thank you. Thank you. And that sounds a little like our mission statement. So thank you for bringing that into this chat. Our mission statement is always read at the beginning by our board president, and I think it's really important and relevant. It's sort of our guiding principles when we talk about what we're going to do. So before I begin, give everyone an opportunity to ask questions, I just want to go over the agenda that we had, and we started with some people got in a little bit late, but thank you for coming because we're excited. I think we have about 10 people on this call, and we're so happy and grateful that you were able to make it. So we have a set agenda. And that set agenda is really what we're going to be talking about. But someone on this call might feel like there's something that they really feel is important for us to discuss. What I ask you is to please email me, because this is the first of a set of Crusader chats specifically geared and focused on curriculum and instruction, because that is our main goal as a school district, is to make sure that we're providing our students with the best instructional instruction and making sure that we provide our best support for our staff as well. So if there's a question that you have regarding that, the topics that we have, this is your opportunity. You can write your question in the chat, and then anyone can jump in and answer the question. But again, I cannot tell you how excited I am that you have joined us. This is our first time, and I know I've said it multiple times that some people may not have heard. You know, I want to apologize ahead of time if we make any errors, if this goes down, but we are really working to communicate with our families and making sure that everybody has an opportunity. There was a discussion last night by one of our board members who felt like 11:30 was difficult for families. We will look at other times, but we have to start. And so 11:30 seemed to be a good time. People might be able to take an early lunch or a later on, but I take all recommendations. Please feel free to email if there's something that you think that is really pertinent to you as a parent. We value your input, so it's really important. So with that, I'm going to start. I think there was somebody who came on and they may have had a question, and I'm trying to see if I can see. I think it was Miss Espina, if that's correct, I think you had a question for us. You raised your hand, but you can put it in the chat if you like, so that we can, if that's easier for you. If it's not, I believe, right, Mr. Kravitz, she can unmute herself and ask
She
the
could.
question. So either way. Okay. Does
Sorry,
anyone?
my question was answered. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad we were able to answer it. Anyone else have any questions? Any comments? Is this something that you prefer? You feel like this is beneficial to you?
Miss Shea is typing her question.
Oh, she's typing it. Thank you, Ms. Shea.
Maybe we need background music for the next.
We do. You know, I'm taking notes. Well, we have our communication specialist on this call. She takes, we are always a work in progress. We admit that to everyone. So maybe next time we have some music in the background, not just my voice. Anyone else can speak if they like, but she's still typing. In the meantime, do we have anybody who would just like to ask a question out loud? Please just raise your hand and go for it. I do want to acknowledge, I believe that I had or have a board member that is here. He may have left. Mr. Reynolds was on the call, and so I'm very appreciative to have our board members join on this, because we are working really hard to make sure that we are communicating with our families, and we're also communicating our goals and our expectations so that we can all achieve this together. While Ms. Shea is typing, I think it's important that if you can, go back to our board meetings. We talked about our goals, and one of the things that we're looking to is increase the proficiency of our students in both ELA and math. And that is a challenge, can be a challenging goal. But I think that one of the things we want to show and model is that sometimes you can have high expectations and really try to reach for them. But if you don't, that's okay, because that's a learning process for us. So we're going to be doing things that are going to challenge ourselves, maybe push ourselves a little bit more. But it's important, because in the end, whatever we do is going to benefit our students. Okay. So this is Ms. Shea. I'll read it out loud. My concern is the new math program. It's very reading and language based. Yes, I agree with you. My son, thankfully, is a great reader and math student, but it is taking a long time for homework due to the excessive writing and reading needed. I know feedback from other parents is that the classroom tests are lengthy and the kids feel pretty defeated using this program. Is there a way to address that with the new standards that we are trying to meet, but also addressing the excessive language basis of it? Hope that makes sense. Yes, it definitely makes sense that there is a lot more language and writing. Who wants to take this question rather?
So I'll take a little bit of it. This is actually true. I had a meeting this morning, you may not believe it, but with Savvis. Savvis is the parent company that produces Envision Math. And your question was pretty much word for word my question. So one of the things that we need to do is I scheduled, and I have to meet with all the principals after this. So surprise, principals, you're going to get to meet with me a little bit too. We're going to talk about having the Savvis professional development team come in again. They came in at the start of the year. I structured it this morning so that they would be able to come in and do full days in every single school building to work along with our teachers to basically get them to best understand exactly what you're saying. It is language heavy. It's a language heavy program. There's a lot of it, but the other reality is math is language heavy. So I think finding the balance is also part of it. And again, in year one, there are 180 school days during the course of the year. The program allows for basically 140 days of instruction for the school year. So there are 40 days of wiggle room. Is probably the best way I can say it. There are 40 days where teachers can say, look, if there's a topic that is taking longer than maybe they thought it would, or if they're finding that students aren't understanding it, whether it's because of language or another reason, there's time built into the calendar of the school year in order for them to be able to best address that. As far as things being too hard or too difficult, or the tests being too long, I haven't heard that exact feedback, but I'm not saying it's not there. I'm sure there for some of our kids it is. And then we need to go back and address that. And one of the things that we're working towards this year is really asking our teachers what they think about the programs that we're utilizing, because that's an important piece to understanding whether or not something's successful. And if it's not, or if it's not as successful as it can be right now, then we need to figure out how to adjust to do two things: meet the needs of the kids and get them to be proficient in the standards, but do it in a balanced way where nobody wants kids feeling defeated or deflated. Nobody wants that, because that's just not good practice. But and it's not just about grit, right? It's not just say, hey, work on through and you'll be fine. While there might be part of that, shouldn't be the MO either. So I think, remember, it's the first year. The teachers have never done this particular new program before. So that is part of what happens in the new program. Brian.
But before
sorry.
Mr. Judice jumps in or speaks, rather, I just want to say thank you for sharing that with us, because that's important feedback. And that's why these meetings are going to be more and more important for us to get this kind of feedback. And I want to echo what Mr. Kravitz said, is we never want to make a child feel defeated, because that doesn't help support them, and it certainly doesn't help them be successful. So that's key as well. Mr. Judice, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to thank as well for the question. The opportunity, parents should always take the opportunity to reach out to the teachers and share their reality from home, because homework should not be taking more than 30 or 40 minutes tops, depending on what grade we're talking about. And if it is reaching beyond that time frame, then the conversation can happen with the teacher, and something can be worked out between the parent and the child and the teacher to make it more manageable. But we should not be having homework that lasts longer than a half an hour, especially for second and third graders. So always reach out to your parents is the point, or reach out to your teachers rather. That way we can help work through some of these immediately.
Thank you. So we have a second question. It says, I wasn't aware that families had access to math videos and other online resources. Can you provide a link to that?
Yeah, so the children all have login accounts through Savas, and you can have your child log on as if he's logging on, at school, and you have access to certain information that the students have access to. Again,
Can I just jump in for a second there? Is there a way that we can send an email to all of our parents with this information? Because I raised two boys, and they didn't always come home and say, hey, Mom, I can do some extra work because I have this login. I don't know about you, and they're grown men now, but they were not so forthcoming with that information. So if we can communicate that to our families, if our principals can send some information regarding that, so all of our parents can understand, can know about this. That's important. So thank you for asking that question. And I think that's a great tool.
For the principals, I'll work with Beth Becker. We'll put something together and I'll share with you guys. Then when we do our communication, you guys can all send it out to your parents.
Absolutely. So Ms. Shea says, my son's teachers post a link every single day to prep for homework. I get an email around 2 p.m. every day to remind him to check it. That's awesome. That's awesome. But we're going to make sure. We're going to just make sure that everyone gets that information.
Right. And that goes back to what we said at the very start of this Crusader chat was, there are things happening in some places or some buildings or some classrooms. And if it's really good practice, then we need to expand that to make sure that more kids are able to receive that, or more families are able to receive that information as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that.
Do we have any questions? Any more questions? Okay. It is 12:30. Oh, wait a minute. I do. I would like to share. I appreciate the transparency by you having this meeting. Thank you, Mrs. Vasquez. As I said before, this is the beginning of a Crusader chat series. And I'm just so happy that we were able to stay on and nothing went wrong as far as the internet. But that could happen. But we're just thankful that you all came on. And again, if you want to send an email to me and say, Mrs. Rodriguez, I would love for you to do this again, but maybe 12 o'clock is better, or 12:30. We are always looking for our families to share best practices for them as far as us communicating. Again, I said that this was our first time, and I think it went relatively well. I hope that those of you that are parents and guardians that are listening, that feel that it was helpful. But again, this is just the beginning, and we want to be 100% transparent with our families so that you can hear from us what we're doing, and help us, right? This goes back to the word partnership. We need to partner with you so that you can give us feedback. And we use a term called, what's the term that we use, Ms. Caldwell? Isn't it? I'm going to have her say it.
Is it benchmarking or critical friends?
Critical friends.
I knew it was one of them.
We call it critical friends, and we need you to be critical friends because it's important, because that's the way that we make great decisions for our staff and our students, but also make great instructional decisions. And then I have Miss Dr. Ruiz said, I apologize if I missed it, but when will the scientific investigations in the classrooms begin?
So I'll take that one to start. So we're waiting. It's funny because the state in their infinite wisdom, they don't just say, hey, here, go do an investigation. So just very quickly, every student in grades 3 or by grade 5 has to take part in 4 investigations. A student can take some in 3rd grade, some in 4th grade, or all of them in 5th grade, depending on how the district wants to structure them. And we are working alongside Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES because in their science coordinator and their program to continue to determine which one should we give in 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade, who should do both. And there's a whole series of things that go along with it. One of the biggest things that we're waiting for are the materials. So with the new investigation, there are materials that have to be ordered. What's happening with our local BOCES is they're putting a group together, or they're saying, hey, look, here's our kit that you can purchase or rent from them. We haven't gotten their final numbers as far as determining should we rent from them or should we just purchase our own, but they wouldn't take place until, typically wouldn't take place at this point until after the ELA and math tests are administered. So you're looking in May and June is when those will be administered this year.
And that will be communicated to our families as well. An email will go out, a letter will go out from our family saying we're going to start doing this. Good question. Any other questions? You're welcome. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you join us again next time. Any feedback that you have, please feel free to email me or anyone here. If you have a specific question, please reach out to the building principal or our directors that are on this call as well. Thank you. Have a great day, and thank you again so much. Be well.